Okay, so this is the Tory Lanez update.
Now, back in 2022, Tory Lanez was found guilty of 3 felonies related to the Megan Thee Stallion shooting that happened back in 2020. It was one of the most confusing and controversial stories in hip-hop in recent years, a long saga that completely divided fans over what actually happened that night. Then in August 2023, Tory Lanez was officially sentenced to 10 years in prison. Ever since then, things have been kind of quiet on Tory's end. There hasn't been much of a spotlight on Tory, no major statements and no updates from his camp. However, back in May, reports surfaced that Tory was actually stabbed during a prison attack, a story that I actually never ended up covering. Thankfully, he survived, but the incident gave fans a rare glimpse into the reality of his life behind bars. Aside from that, he's actually been very active on the music side. Recently, Tory's team completed uploading 2 of his classic tapes on streaming platforms, a move that's brought his name into the conversations again. But before we go deeper into everything that's been happening with Tory right now, let's rewind for a second back to where this whole situation really started. Back in July 2020, news broke that Tory Lanez had been arrested on a gun charge after what was described as an argument outside a Hollywood Hills party. According to TMZ, police got a call around 4:30 a.m. about a disturbance outside a residence. Witnesses reported hearing people arguing inside an SUV, followed by gunshots in the air before the vehicle sped off. When police later found the SUV, both Tory Lanez and Megan Thee Stallion were inside, along with another man. Officers also found a firearm in the car, and Tory was taken into custody and booked for carrying a concealed weapon. At the time, reports claimed that Megan simply had cut her foot on broken glass inside the vehicle, but what nobody knew back then was that this would eventually turn into one of the most controversial and confusing cases in modern hip-hop history. Because just hours before all this, Tory Lanez and Megan Thee Stallion had actually been seen together on Instagram Live, hanging out at a pool party with Kylie Jenner. Nobody could have guessed that by the end of that same night, things would spiral into a situation that would dominate headlines for years. A few days later, things started to take a darker turn. On July 15th, 2020, Megan Thee Stallion came forward publicly and revealed that she had actually been shot multiple times that night. In an Instagram post, she said, "I suffered gunshot wounds as a result of a crime that was committed against me and done with the intention to physically harm me." She didn't mention who shot her or why at the time, but this post completely changed how people viewed the situation, because up until that point, most headlines made it sound like it was just broken glass or some kind of accident, and then Megan clarified that she had undergone surgery to remove the bullets and wanted to correct the inaccurate stories that were circulating online. And that's when the narrative started shifting very fast. Tory Lanez had already been arrested that night on a concealed weapons charge and was released on bail shortly after, but Megan's statements made it clear this wasn't a misunderstanding or a small altercation. Something serious had gone down that night. Then came the shocking twist that completely changed everything. In August 2020, Megan Thee Stallion went live on Instagram and directly accused Tory Lanez of shooting her. Looking straight into the camera, she said, "You shot me."
Yes, this nigga Tory shot me. You shot me.
She also called him out for allegedly letting his team spread lies to blogs and media outlets to downplay what happened. At that point, Tory hadn't been charged for the shooting itself, only for possession of a concealed weapon, but this moment flipped the entire narrative. What had started as speculation suddenly turned into a full-blown accusation, and it sent the internet into chaos. Fans were split. Some people immediately believed Megan, while others refused to accept that Tory could have done something like that. And with no official statements from his side, just silence, the confusion continued to grow even more. Megan also posted a photo and later deleted the photo of her injured foot, saying she had to undergo surgery to remove the bullets. She later explained that she didn't initially tell police who shot her because she was scared, according to her, right? So for a while, the truth of that night became one of the biggest mysteries in hip-hop, and everyone had an opinion, but nobody had the full story. Now here's what allegedly happened that night. According to prosecutors, the shooting took place shortly after Tory and Megan had left the party in the Hollywood Hills, and the party was hosted by Kylie Jenner. Both of them were in an SUV along with Megan's friend Kelsey Harris and Tory's bodyguard. And at some point, things inside the car kind of got heated. Megan asked to get outside, and then that's when things escalated pretty fast. Authorities say that that's when Tory allegedly fired several shots against Megan, or towards her I should say, injuring her foot. The sound of gunfire led to multiple 911 calls from nearby homes being made, and soon after, police pulled over the SUV near Hollywood Boulevard. Officers found Megan with injuries to her feet, injuries she initially told police were from stepping on broken glass. And then later, Megan would go on Instagram Live claiming that Tory was the one who shot her. Tory, on the other hand, maintained his innocence from the start, and his legal team argued that there were a lot of inconsistencies in the story that was being told, pointing out that Megan didn't initially tell police or paramedics she'd been shot. So at this point, the case had turned into one of the most confusing and talked about moments in modern hip-hop history, and a lot of people were just wondering, like, what the hell even happened, right? So nobody really knew what to believe, and both sides were sticking to their versions of what happened that night. And as time went on, things started to become more official. In October 2020, Los Angeles prosecutors charged Tory Lanez with shooting Megan Thee Stallion during that argument in the Hollywood Hills. According to the complaint, Tory was accused of firing at Megan's feet after she got out of the SUV and was hit with 2 felony counts: assault with a semi-automatic firearm and carrying a loaded, unregistered gun in a vehicle. If convicted, Tory at the time was facing up to 23 years in prison. Now, at the time, Tory hadn't said much publicly. He was arrested on the night of the shooting, then released on bail, and for a while, nobody knew what his side of the story really was, right? Then in late September, he finally broke his silence, but not in the way people expected. Instead of speaking out through interviews or social media, he dropped a full project titled Daystar, where he addressed the allegations through his music. On the album, he denied shooting Megan Thee Stallion and questioned some of the narratives surrounding the case. Meanwhile, Megan continued to speak on the situation through Instagram Live and interviews, calling it the worst experience of her life. And the two sides were completely split, which created a lot of conversations during that time, and the tension only kept growing. As time went on, the case slowly made its way through the system. For more than 2 years, both sides stood firm. Tory continued to deny the accusations, while Megan Thee Stallion stayed vocal about what she said happened. The situation created one of the biggest divides the culture had seen in a long time. And then in December of 2022, it all came to an end. After weeks of testimony, a Los Angeles jury found Tory Lanez guilty on 3 felony counts connected to the 2020 shooting: assault with a semi-automatic firearm, having a loaded, unregistered weapon in a vehicle, and discharging a firearm with gross negligence. It was the conclusion of a long, messy, and emotional saga that had dominated headlines for years. According to reports, Tory showed little reaction as the verdict was read. He was handcuffed in court and taken into custody immediately. The moment was intense. His father reportedly stood up in the courtroom and shouted about the system being corrupt before being escorted out by deputies. This verdict marked the end of a 2-year story that started with confusion and ended with a conviction. Throughout the trial, Megan testified that Tory had fired the gun toward her feet, while Tory's defense argued that another person in the car could have been responsible. It was a case full of contradictions, emotions, and public pressure. And by the time the verdict came down, everyone involved had already been through years of scrutiny. And then finally, in August of 2023, the story reached its end. Tory Lanez was sentenced to 10 years in prison for the shooting of Megan Thee Stallion.
Musician Tory Lanez, convicted of shooting rapper Megan Thee Stallion, sentenced to 10 years in prison.
This came months after he was found guilty on 3 felony counts connected to the 2020 shooting, and prosecutors had been pushing for 13 years while Tory's defense asked for probation and a treatment program, arguing that he had turned to alcohol as a way to cope with childhood trauma. In the end, the judge decided on 10 years. During the sentencing, Megan shared a written statement saying, "Since I was viciously shot by the defendant, I have not experienced a single day of peace. Slowly but surely, I'm healing and coming back, but I will never be the same." Tory also spoke in court for the first time. He said he still cared for Megan and that the two had bonded over the loss of their mothers, admitting that he had said some immature things during the years that followed. His father gave an emotional statement as well, talking about how Tory's music became his outlet after losing his mom at just 11 years old. Outside the courtroom, reactions were mixed. Some people felt like justice was finally served, while others believed Tory had been treated unfairly. This moment officially closed one of the most polarizing sagas in modern hip-hop, a story that had started at a Hollywood Hills pool party and ended in a courtroom 3 years later. Ever since Tory's sentencing, things have been pretty quiet. The media hasn't really focused on him that much, outside from a few minor mentions here and there. There haven't been too many updates on how he's actually doing. However, there was one major story that nearly cost him his life. In May of 2025, news broke that Tory Lanez had been stabbed inside a California prison. According to reports, the attack happened early in the morning inside a housing unit at the California Correctional Institution of, I have no clue how the hell you say that, I'm not even gonna try. Tehachapi. Alright, Tehachapi. Tory was reportedly stabbed 14 times by another inmate, suffering wounds to his back, torso, head, and face. The injuries were so severe that both of his lungs actually collapsed. He was rushed to a nearby hospital and temporarily placed on a breathing machine before being stabilized. A post shared to his Instagram later said that Tory was awake, speaking normally and in good spirits, despite the pain, thanking God for helping him pull through. Prison officials confirmed an investigation was underway, though they didn't share details about what led up to the attack or the motive behind it. Not long after the stabbing made headlines, more details started to come out about who was behind the attack. According to officials, the man accused of stabbing Tory Lanez was 41-year-old Santino Casio, a convicted killer currently serving a life sentence for murder. Casio has been locked up since 2004 and was already known for doing a bunch of violent stuff, behind bars. Over the years, he picked up a bunch of charges while he was incarcerated, including assaulting another prisoner in 2008 and being caught with a weapon again in 2018. After the attack, Casio was placed in restricted housing while investigators looked into what happened and why. Prison officials haven't shared any motive, but it was clear this wasn't some random fight. Casio's record paints the picture of someone who's been dangerous for a long time, and the stabbing left Tory Lanez with multiple wounds across his body, collapsing both of his lungs again, and forcing him into a breathing machine. Still, he managed to pull through, and according to his Instagram, he's been talking, staying positive, and thanking God that he's alive. So very lucky for Tory that he survived, and to this day nobody knows exactly why the attack happened. Prison officials never released a motive, and honestly, that's not unusual. There's a lot of politics that go on behind those walls that most people never hear about. It could have been a misunderstanding or someone trying to assert power behind those walls. But obviously that's just speculation. In a place like that, anything's possible though. The man who stabbed Tory is serving a life sentence, so he's got nothing to lose, right? Meanwhile, Tory is serving a fixed sentence, and it's speculated that he'll be out before 2030. So for somebody who's stuck inside forever, maybe that alone was enough reason for them to lash out. Either way, it's still wild to think that this could have literally been the end of his life. But thank God it wasn't, right? Tory ended up recovering from the incident, and from what's been reported, he's doing a lot better now. We know that both of his lungs had collapsed, and injuries like that can take a long time to heal. Collapsed lungs can leave you with breathing problems, chest pains, and shortness of breath.
We went toward the danger, not away from it.
Lives depend on it.
We are frontliners.
You okay?
We made
That lasts for months, sometimes even years, and even with treatment, it can make it very hard for you to stay active, and it puts you at risk if anything like that ever happens again. So for Tory to be moving, talking, and staying positive after all that, obviously that's a huge blessing for him. Music-wise, he has been active, by the way. Recently, he put up 2 of his new Toronto tapes on streaming platforms, so despite everything, he's still finding ways to feed his fans from behind bars. Now, back in August, another update came out about Tory's case. According to reports, his lawyer tried to submit what they called new evidence that could potentially change everything for Tory. His legal team stated that a security guard had come forward claiming he overheard Megan's former best friend, Kelsey Nicole, or I believe that was her actual nickname, right? But her real name is Kelsey Harris, admitting that she had fired the gun and that Tory actually had tried to stop her. They also argued that Tory's driver never got to testify during the trial, which they believed could have helped his case, but the court, they just didn't buy this. And both requests were officially denied on August 13th, 2025. Tory's lawyers said that the security guard's statements proved Tory never shot anyone, but Megan's team quickly shut that down, saying that the case had already been handled in court and that Tory was convicted by a jury of his peers. So for now, the so-called new evidence won't change anything. Tory's still serving his 10-year sentence, and once again, his attempt to challenge the case fell short. Now, a few days after that, Tory's legal team was back in court again. This time, they were arguing that his original trial in 2022 wasn't fair. And according to reports, Tory's lawyer claimed prosecutors said things in front of the jury that they couldn't really prove, mainly about Megan's former bodyguard. His name is Justin. And back then, prosecutors told jurors that Justin Edison, Megan's former bodyguard, would testify and say that Tory admitted to being the shooter after the incident. But he actually never ended up showing up to court, so he basically just disappeared. And Tory's lawyers said that that move wasn't fair because it made the jury expect a key witness who never came, which could have influenced how they saw the case. The judges listened to both sides, but didn't really say much, and the prosecution fired back, calling the defense argument nonsensical, and said that there was already enough evidence to convict Tory, from witness statements to texts and even recorded jail calls. Right now, the judge still hasn't made a final decision, so even after everything, the trial, the sentence, and the time Tory has already done so far, Tory's legal fight still is not over. At this point, it's really just a waiting game to see what happens next. I'm sure a lot of you guys were probably wondering what's been going on with Tory Lanez, and of course, I'm always here to keep you guys informed. Drop a like on this video if you made it this far. I appreciate you for.
It's good to hear his story. And then also still very twisted with the jury, the courts, and then the case itself. But it's good to hear about the story and see how he's doing.